Hi, everybody. Thank you for showing up today. I see we've got a full house, which is awesome. I can see you guys are very excited about Andrew's talk today, as I am. Andrew Skurka is kind enough to join us today. He is a trekker, as many of you probably know, described as Adventure of the Year by Outside, and a Superman among trekkers by National Geographic. He's gone on a number of long treks all across the country, and we're very happy to have him today to talk about his new book and go over the clinic. So thank you, Andrew, and here you go.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I'd say I never expected to get a standing room only turnout at Google. So thanks very much for coming out, I guess. And thank you, Andrew, for organizing it. I'm not sure how it normally works if you want to speak here at Google, but I'm thankful that my sister and brother-in-law are friends with Andrew, and Andrew was able to push it on through the system and get this thing going today. Today's clinic is going to be mostly about backpacking gear, supplies, and skills. I give another presentation where I tell a lot more stories, but today I want to give you guys some how-to information so that you guys can go out there and enjoy your own backpacking trips a little bit more. Let's go ahead and just walk through what we're going to do. So the first thing, just quickly, we'll go quick introduction. I want to understand who you guys are and what sort of backpacking you do and what sort of backpacking you want to do. And I'll just give you a little bit of context for who I am too. And then I'll introduce 3 questions that I always ask before I go on any backpacking trip. And those 3 questions are really helpful in understanding the gear, supplies, and skills that I'll need once I get out there. And then the bulk of the presentation will be on the stuff that I have in front of me here, where we'll come up with a hypothetical trip that everyone can relate to. So for example, we'll say, all right, we're going to go for a 4-day trip in the High Sierra in August, and we'll talk about the conditions that we're going to experience on a trip like that, and then we'll talk about the gear that I would take with me on such a trip. So let me start off with you guys. Why don't someone be willing to raise their hand, tell me who they are, what sort of backpacking you do, and what you'd like to get out of the clinic today. Yes, sir.
My name is Justin. I'm a former thru hiker on the AT.
Cool.
So I have hopes and aspirations for hardcore trips, but I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old.
Okay.
So we're mostly relegated to 2-mile round trips, trying to keep kids happy, and I would just love to hear the family aspect of getting on this.
Okay, I'll do my best to address some of the family issue. I have to say that without a wife or children, it'll be a little bit difficult, but I can wonder. Who else? One more person? Yes?
My name is Pasky, and I'm interested in lightweight backpacking.
Okay.
So what's the minimal gear you can take?
So it's, what was your name again? Spas. Spas is interested in basically knowing what the minimum amount of gear you need to take out there is. And maybe one more person? Yes?
Eitan, I've known you for 5 years on the forums,
yep.
And so ex-military, ex-Boy Scout, now hiker and backpacker, and I'm interested in learning more advanced technique for lightening up my gear. And
okay. All right, EJ, basically interested in figuring out how to lighten up his load and probably still be safe and comfortable at the same time. Just to give you guys some context about where I'm coming from, I'm known for doing really long, really light, really fast, long-distance backpacking trips. This was my first mega long-distance trip I did back in 2004, 2005. It was the C2C route. It was 7,800 miles. It took me 11 months. I started up in Gaspé, Quebec in August and finished in Cape Alava in Washington in July, which means I spent winter on the trail, and I snowshoed 1,400 miles that winter through Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota during the months of January, February, and March. My second mega long-distance trip was the Great Western Loop. It was 6,875 miles in 7 months. I averaged 33 miles per day for 208 days. And then my last big trip was the Alaska Yukon expedition, which was 4,700 miles in 6 months, skis, foot, and pack raft, and that was in 2010. I've done a bunch of shorter trips in between all those, but that gives you a pretty good feel for where I'm coming at. And then I should point out that even though I'm known for doing these crazy trips that not many people can relate to, I also do a lot of these clinics. I also guide trips. I answer a lot of questions via email from people who are much less experienced and who don't have the ability to go out for 6 months at a time. So I hope that I can relate to you and give you some information that is valuable. So let me go over the 3 questions that I always ask myself before I go on a trip. The first one is, what are my objectives? I think that's a really important question that not too many people ask themselves. And I'll go a little bit into each question a little bit more in a second. The second question I ask myself is, what are the environmental and route conditions that I'm going to be encountering? So temperatures, precipitation, water availability, wildlife, insects. And then the final question that I always ask is, what are the gear, supplies, and skills that I need to help achieve my objectives while keeping me safe and comfortable in those environmental and route conditions? And the way I think about it, gear, supplies, and skills are just tools. They're just enablers. They're just means. But the whole reason that I go out there is for that objective, and whatever that is. So let's talk about objectives a little bit. When you're on a backpacking trip, you can basically break it down in two different types of activities. There's hiking, and then there's camping. Hiking is literally just putting one foot in front of the other, and camping is either camping or any extracurricular activity that doesn't involve hiking. So birding, journaling, bird watching, hunting, fishing, photography. And when I look at all the backpackers out there, I kind of put them into three different categories. The first category I call an ultimate camper, which is someone whose objective is basically just to walk between campsites in order to do something else. And they don't really, it's not really relevant that they know what sort of environmental and route conditions they're going to be getting themselves into, because they can carry as much as they possibly want. They're not carrying it for very far. And they also tend to carry like really heavy, luxurious, extraneous items. These are the people you see set up in camp at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon having like a steak lunch. They're basically mobile car campers, I think is maybe a better way to describe them. And they prefer, when they go for a backpacking trip, they're in the pursuit of type 1 fun, which I say is fun to do and fun to talk about later. Which is very different than the way that an ultimate hiker approaches a backpacking trip. So an ultimate hiker looks something a little bit more like this. And when they go on a backpacking trip, their primary objective is to walk. And they need to know the exact environmental and route conditions that they're going to be encountering, because that way they can take the gear, supplies and have the skills that they need to be safe and comfortable in those conditions. They optimize their pack for the on-trail experience, so they're packing light, but they're not packing stupid light. And then, maybe more importantly, they rely on the stuff between their ears to keep themselves safe and comfortable. So a great example of this is when an ultimate hiker versus an ultimate camper chooses a campsite. So an ultimate camper plods along the trail, and after a couple miles, finds himself a campsite that's right next to a water source that's been camped on by tens of thousands of other people. It's denuded of topsoil or of leaves or anything like that. And they set themselves up and they create this, this big sprawl of stuff, and then they get out their really thick sleeping pad and their double wall, big tent, and they hang out there and then they go to bed. Whereas an ultimate hiker, they'll hike all day and they'll choose a campsite that very few people have slept at, if any. So has this nice thick bed of needles or moss or leaves. And they won't camp near a water source because that's where the bugs are. And it's also the water source, or the drainage, is usually where the cold, wet air accumulates at night. So they'll camp somewhere else where it's drier, less buggy, and warmer. And that allows them to take less gear than they would need otherwise. And then an ultimate hiker is in the pursuit of type 2 fun. Not fun to do, but fun to talk about later. So it's kind of the way like an athlete or a runner approaches a marathon. There's nothing fun about running a marathon. It's type 2 fun. I mean, it's something that like afterwards, that night when you're in the bar, you can be like, wow, remember at mile 22 where I vomited all over myself? That was awesome, man. And then there's this third category of backpacker. I call them a camper by default. And this is a classic shot. This is a picture of a Boy Scout that was sent to me actually last night, and I just had to include it in this. So they actually don't really understand their primary objective. They haven't figured out whether they want to go hiking or whether they want to go camping. And even if they did think about that, they don't understand how that objective translates into the gear, supplies, and skills that they need. And then they don't understand what they're getting themselves into. So they don't understand how cold it is, how likely it is that it might rain, what the insect situation is going to be. So they end up saying, well, I don't really know what I'm getting myself into, so I'll take a lot of things just in the grounds of what if or just in case, because I can't rule out those scenarios. They take a lot of heavy stuff that's really easy to use, and just too much stuff. And unfortunately, they oftentimes experience type 3 fun, which is not fun to do, and it's not fun to talk about later either. Which you might say, well, then how can that be fun? But this is an outdoor educator thing. Everything is fun when you're outdoors. So. OK, so the presentation today, or this clinic here, it's designed for any backpacker who wants to at least sometimes be more like an ultimate hiker. I'm here to help you enjoy your hiking experience more. I don't want it to be an arduous activity between campsites. I don't want you to sacrifice your comfort or your safety if you want to enjoy that hiking experience. OK, let's talk about gear and supplies for a little bit. This is kind of where the interaction starts a little bit more. So put yourself in the shoes of an ultimate hiker and think about the characteristics of gear and supplies that you're looking for. Please offer me some characteristics. What do you guys think are the most important things? Lightweight, durability.
Waterproof.
Depends, not necessarily. Multi-use. Come on, a few others.
Just barely enough.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sufficient. OK. So let me run the list down. So functionality is important, comfort, efficiency, durability, reliability, ease of use, value, cost, and then lightweight but not stupid light. These characteristics aren't that different from what every other backpacker looks for. I think the ultimate hiker thing oftentimes gets caught up in this lightweight backpacking thing, which I understand, but it's not all of, don't be blinded by the weight of an item. So a great example of that would be, I once did I was attempting a speed record on the Colorado Trail, which runs from Denver to Durango. And I expected it to take me about 11 days or 12 days. And to save weight, I didn't carry a sleeping bag. And that's a great example of going stupid light, because I didn't sleep at all the first 3 or 4 nights. And I was just so sort of incapacitated by not being recovered at night that it undermined my entire effort. So yeah, that's... And then so the skills are what you carry between your ears. And for the ultimate hiker, skills are really important because we're carrying a minimal amount of stuff. A lot of the stuff that we use requires skills. So this, I need some interaction here. But what are the skills that you need if you want to carry down insulation instead of, say, synthetic insulation, either in your sleeping bag or a parka? What's the skill that you need? You need to keep it dry. That's right. All right. If you're going to carry just enough food and water instead of extra, what's the skill that you need? Planning. And what was the other one? Know where water is. You need to know where water is. That's right. OK. If you're going to use a modular tarp system instead of a double wall tent, what's the skill? Where in camp. Campsite selection. That's right. Right. And how to pitch it. Absolutely. Because it's not just as easy as putting one pole in, another pole in, then pop, the whole thing goes. If you're going to carry a minimal first aid kit instead of ambulance-worthy supplies, what are the skills?
Stay out of trouble.
That's, everyone laughs, but like that's the best one. I mean, I try not to ever use my first aid kit. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to use my first aid kit. So yeah, so it's decision making. And then certainly, if there is a first aid situation, it's being resourceful and trying to make do with what you have. If you're going to take a map and compass instead of a GPS, what's the skill? Yeah, navigating, knowing how to find north, knowing what a contour line means. I think you guys get the idea. But we'll go to this one. If you're going to carry a closed cell foam pad instead of a plush inflatable, what's the skill? Campsite selection. Yep.
Clothing. Knowing how to dress for it.
Right, clothing would certainly help. And then the other one I've always heard is how to take a sleeping pill. For that one too, which I wouldn't recommend, but it works. All right, so let's talk about these environmental and route conditions. Whenever I go on a trip, I do, before my Alaska Yukon trip, it took me, so it was a 6-month-long trip, and it took me 6 months to plan. And for about 5 months of that, it was basically the entire trip existed on my computer in an Excel spreadsheet, a National Geographic topo. Mapping file and basically a Google Earth file, but a lot of it was spent looking at these conditions and understanding what I would need while I was out there. And so we'll go through this list again very shortly. But these are all the things that I look at that inform the decisions about the gear, supplies, and skills that I need. So now we need to come up with a hypothetical trip. So looking for suggestions about where we should go, what time of year we should go, and for how long you guys want to go. And make it a trip that everyone can relate to. So don't say like, Baffin Island in January.
Hiking Mount Whitney.
All right, Mount Whitney. Okay, and how long do we want to go for?
2 days.
2 days? Let's make it 3. How much vacation time do they give you guys around here? All right, so 3 days, and what time of year would you like to go?
Probably August.
August. Does that sound good to everybody? Let's go in July. The bugs are worse in July, so that gives me a little bit more. August, the conditions are so good in the Sierra in August. That's almost too easy. I mean, you can go up there with not much more than a pocket knife and some fire starter, and you'll be okay. Okay. I might have just exaggerated that. Sorry. All right. So let me go back to this slide. Okay. So now we're going to go climb Mount Whitney and maybe do a little bit more of a trip around Whitney. 3 days, July. Let's go in the middle of July. So let's talk about the conditions that we're going to encounter on this trip. So let's start with temperatures. What are we looking at? 70s, 80s, probably. How would you find that out?
You look at historical climate.
Exactly. You look up, there are weather stations all over the Sierra. Look up, find a weather station that's near Mount Whitney. Look at the historical weather data. Sometimes you can find like the range on it. That'll give you a pretty good feel for what the temperatures will be like. What sort of precipitation will we have in July around near Mount Whitney? Almost, well, maybe. If we do get rain on, what kind of rain is it going to be?
Thunderstorm.
It's going to be a thunderstorm. So we have to at least be planned for that scenario. How much daylight do we have? Quite a bit. And the reason that daylight affects the things that I'll take with me is because in the summertime, for example, like let's say I'm in Alaska in June, I don't have to carry a headlamp with me. But then if I'm in like Minnesota in January, then the days are really short, and I'm going to have to carry probably a couple of different lights, extra batteries, and I'll probably also take a slightly heavier sleeping bag and clothing system because I'll spend a lot more time in camp, and I won't be able to rely on my body heat to keep me quite as warm. What sort of ground cover will we encounter in terms of, is there going to be snow cover? What sort of, is it like nice groomed trails? Are they rocky? Are they like nice and soft? What's it like up there?
They have nice trails.
What's that?
They have nice trails.
Nice trails, but they're pretty rocky.
Yeah.
And what about snow coverage in the middle of July around Mount Whitney?
Some near the top.
Some near the top, but enough where, are you going to need skis or snowshoes? Okay. And again, you could find that out. There's the government runs a service called the National Snow Analyses, and you can look it up, and you can see where the snow coverage is at a given time of year. What sort of vegetation is there? It depends on the elevation, so you could get some pine. A little bit higher up, what happens? You're above the tree line. So what's the sun exposure like up there? It's intense. You're at 13,000, 14,000 feet. There's no shading, so you better be prepared for that. How much water is there in the middle of July around Mount Whitney? Lots, yeah. So you probably, you won't have to carry much water, if any at all. And wildlife? What's that? I heard mosquitoes. Right, so you'll definitely have mosquitoes. Anybody been in like peak mosquito season up in the Sierra? Raise their hand. Well, we can all sympathize for each other, yeah. They get pretty bad, so you'd want to be prepared for that. And then what about the wildlife?
Bears.
That's right, there are bears. Are the bears problematic in the Sierra? They are definitely problematic. So if you look up, go to the Sierra Kings Canyon National Park website, they'll tell you, yes, bears are a problem here. We require all people who are climbing, or all backpackers who are going up Mount Whitney to carry a bear canister, et cetera, et cetera. All right, how remote is Mount Whitney? And it's more remote than here, but are you going to have cell reception? If you get hurt, is someone going to come up on you within like half an hour? Yeah, I think so. It's heavily traveled area. You're not going to need a satellite phone. Your cell phone actually will work from the top of Mount Whitney because you're looking right down on Lone Pine. And then any natural hazards we need to be worried about, big river fords, lightning, avalanches, anything like that? Lightning is definitely a concern. I don't think depending on the route that you're picking, there probably are not big river ford problems on this trip. Okay, so let's talk about everything that I would take with me on this trip. And I'm going to step away from this. So we'll start off with clothing. All right, yeah. Okay, clothing system typically has 3 different pieces to it, and each piece has a specific purpose, but there's always a little bit of overlap. So you have active layers, you have insulation, and you have shells. Your active layers are designed to manage moisture, protect your skin against sun, brush, bugs, and then also to give you a little bit of modesty. And the clothing system I would take with me on this trip, or the active layer I'd take with me on this trip, I'll start off with the top part. Because I am going to be dealing with bugs, I would take a woven polyester or nylon shirt. The bugs have a hard time biting through a woven fabric, which is different than, say, this knit shirt, like this polyester knit shirt. The bugs will bite right through this. So you can oftentimes find these woven shirts. They look like kind of safari shirts or travel shirts, but they're great for bugs. And I would also make sure it's long sleeve, not only for the bug protection, but also to protect my arms against the sun as well. And then on my bottoms, I would probably wear a pair of lightweight polyester or merino wool underwear. Just boxer briefs would be fine. They're really light. And then a pair of nylon woven trekking pants like this. Again, this would be great for the bugs. It keeps the sun off of my legs. And if I was going to be doing any off-trail travel, the pants are really nice when you're beating through the brush as well. Your legs won't get all chopped up. If it were a different time of year, say if you were going later in the fall, like say the end of August or September, I might at that point just go with like a short sleeve merino wool or a polyester shirt like this one here, or a long sleeve. This tends to breathe a lot better, so it's not quite as stuffy because the fabric isn't quite as tight. But the bugs will bite right through this, so I wouldn't take this out until the bugs are pretty much gone. Any questions about what I would wear during the day? Okay, I'll keep on moving then. So the second layer that I would take with me are shells. And there are 2 different types of shells. There's what the industry calls a water-resistant shell, like this one here. And then there's what the industry calls a waterproof breathable shell, like this one here. Let me give you a different interpretation for these types of shells. Water-resistant to me means that it's fairly breathable, which means that moisture can move through the fabric, but it's not water-resistant. Just get over it. If you get stuck in a rainstorm wearing just a wind shirt, you're going to get wet. And the reason that they say that it's water-resistant is because when they make it in the factory, there's a coating on here. It's called a durable water repellent finish. But it gets degraded very quickly due to abrasion, body oils, sweat, dirt. So it quickly loses its effectiveness. So this is nice for like windy summits, for dry, very, very light rain, for dry snow. The wind shell works pretty well. And then the waterproof breathable shell, everyone knows these by a brand name Gore-Tex. This I would describe as barely breathable, so it's kind of like wearing a plastic bag. And it's water resistant for a while. It basically will delay you getting wet. But this is a good time to point out that you're outdoors. There's no way to control the climate. You have to have some realistic expectations about what your gear can and cannot do. And my experience is that when it's wet outside, I'm going to get wet. And there are some things that I can do to minimize or prolong getting wet, and also try to be comfortable when wet, but I'm going to get wet, so just kind of get over that. And for this trip here, I would probably, in August, I would probably just take the wind shell, or the waterproof breathable shell. If I get caught in a storm, that's going to be pretty short-lived. I can put this on, it'll keep me comfortable for an hour, and after an hour, the storm is going to leave, and I can take this off, and I probably won't. I might be a little bit wet inside, but no big deal. And that night I can start a fire and dry out. Any questions about waterproof breathable shells? Or shells in general? Yes?
Probably not for me, but hard shells versus soft shells.
So you might have heard water-resistant shells described as a soft shell, and waterproof breathable shells described as hard shells. So it's just synonymous. Yes?
Kind of related to water, have you thought of umbrellas? I've heard some people using umbrellas and trading, that weight.
Right, so umbrellas definitely are another way to go. Umbrellas work really well because excellent ventilation, right? I mean, and but imagine being caught on, say, at 13,000 feet in a thunderstorm, and you only have an umbrella. I mean, remember Mary Poppins? And then I also don't like umbrellas because I like trekking poles. So trekking poles aren't compatible with an umbrella. But umbrellas are also great out in the desert, just to keep the sun off of you. Like you can find umbrellas that have it's a radiant heat reflector. It's that silvery space blanket material. What's it called? Mylar. Mylar, yeah. And so I know a lot of people who are big fans from there. But I don't like it because as I'm carrying it, I can feel it holding me back, kind of like a race car at the end of a drag strip where the parachute goes out. And so I don't want to lose. I don't want to have my pace drop down from 3.3 miles an hour to 3.2. That'd be a tragedy. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a big difference when you're hiking 6,800 miles. So, okay, and then the last layer that I would take with me is insulation. There are a couple of different types of insulated layers. You could take fleece, like this here, or you could take a category I refer to as puffies, which are it's a really thin or really lightweight shell fabric, really lightweight interior fabric, and then sandwiched between is either a synthetic insulation like Primaloft or ClimaShield, or a goose down, that's just a little filament of goose down. For the West, because it's so dry, I highly recommend down as opposed to synthetic. It's a lot lighter it's much warmer for its weight. It's longer lasting. It's more compressible. It's also not made of plastic. And then the fleece layers don't really make that much sense here in the American West either because they're pretty heavy for the amount of weight that they, for the amount of warmth that they give you. The one time I recommend fleece is in the shoulder seasons around here where you could be up in the Sierra, say in October, and you could get cold and wet, in which case fleece will do a much better job at retaining its warmth when it's wet than a puffy jacket like this one here. Now, oftentimes you hear people talk about synthetic insulations and they say, well, synthetic insulations stay warm when they're wet. Nothing stays warm when it's wet. And my experience is that synthetic insulations down doesn't get wet from me dropping it in a river or not protecting the items in my pack from a rainstorm. Down gets wet because it absorbs ambient humidity. So in humid environments like the East Coast, they don't work that well because they're always absorbing that humidity. Whereas here in the West, it's usually really low humidity, so down stays pretty dry, and it's really an effective insulator. Any questions on insulation? No? All right, let's jump to footwear. So the footwear I would use on a trip like this, does anyone have a pair of hiking shoes? Like a pair of Merrells or, probably not, I see, yeah, I'll take these. Okay. All right, so the pair of shoes that I would normally recommend is a pair of lightweight trail running shoes. These are a little bit skimpy for a backpacking trip, but the reason I like trail running shoes is because they're comfortable to put on is right out of the box. They breathe really well, so they're not hot. They don't trap all my foot perspiration. They dry out really fast once they get wet, and they're also much lighter weight. And the military has done. I've seen the studies on this. Military's done studies where they figured out that 1 extra pound on your foot is equivalent to carrying an extra 6 pounds on your back in terms of effort because you're always swinging your feet. So your feet move a lot more. So there's a lot more effort involved in moving them. If you're not willing to go to a trail running shoe, and again, I wouldn't recommend something this skimpy, but something just a little bit burlier, then you can go with this is more of a hiking boot, but something like a low-cut version of this works pretty well too. It's fairly supportive, good protection, it's pretty durable, but still much lighter weight than your conventional backpacking boots, Italian-made, leather waffle stompers. And I recommend going with a non-waterproof shoe. My experience is that when it's wet outside, there's nothing I can do about keeping anything about me dry. So For example, if I were to wear a waterproof shoe, when it's not wet, my foot is going to be, or a lot of the perspiration from my foot is going to be trapped in that shoe. And then when it does get wet, like if I have to ford a creek, or I'm in a rainstorm and water drips down my legs, then it takes a long time for that waterproof shoe or boot to get dry. So it's much better just to go with a non-waterproof shoe that dries fast and that squeegees the water out. And then you have to deal with the issue of just having wet feet. So let me skip a few slides. So there are a few things that I wasn't dealing very well with wet feet that day. There are a few things that I do as far as foot care goes. First thing, I always try to preemptively treat my feet. So if I notice a hot spot coming on, immediately I stop and I take care of it before it goes into a full-fledged blister. If you start getting blistered, your trip is greatly curtailed. It's just too painful to be walking on blisters. So really be proactive about your foot care. I also try to keep my feet, to the best of my ability, clean, warm, and dry. So I wash my socks. Usually, I carry, in the West here, I carry 2 pairs of socks. I won't show you these, I won't pass these around, but it's just a pair of thin cycling socks. I carry 2 pairs, and I'll wear the first pair through midday, and then I'll stop and I'll put on my other pair, and I'll take that pair that I was wearing the first half of the day and I'll wash it, and I'll put it on the outside of my pack to dry. And by the time I arrive in camp, it's dry, it's clean, and I can wear it to bed. I also try to make sure that my feet are warm at night. So in this photo here, my feet, this was in the Alaska range. My feet have been wet for about 12, 13 hours. I was wearing a pair of leather ski boots. And my feet, when I got up the next morning, were totally fine because I gave them 9 hours where they were dry, they were warm, and I was able to pound on them all day long the next day, despite them looking like this when I pulled into camp. And then because my feet are oftentimes wet, I have to figure out how to deal with moisture. And the thing that I recommend is, there are a couple of different things you can use. What I've been using recently is it's a wax-based balm. It's called, this is a company called Bonnie's Balm. And I put this on my feet at night after they've dried out and let the wax or the oils absorb into my skin. And that, the next day, what that does is it basically kind of keeps some of the water out, and it also keeps my foot moisturized. And the problem with wet feet is that your feet get macerated. So they get pruny, they get soft, they're prone to blistering. And a wax like this will really help to minimize that. It won't eliminate it, but it will allow you to deal with wet feet like this. And then the final thing about footwear, I never try new footwear in a high-risk environment. So if I'm going to go on a long trip, I'm going to have gone on a shorter trip before then, just to make sure that my footwear system, my socks, and my shoes are good.
Quick question about that.
Yes?
When you're going on like a 5,000-mile hike, I'm assuming that one pair of shoes doesn't hold up. Do you have like...
One pair of shoes is not enough for a 5,000-mile trip, correct. So what I rely on the U.S. Postal System to, basically before my trip, I figure out all these resupply points, and then before I leave, I box up a bunch of food and new supplies and shoes, and I mail it out to myself. So the pair of shoes that I was using on my Alaska trip would last me for about 450 miles, give or take, depending on the conditions. So I would just approximately every 450 miles find a place to ship myself a new pair of shoes.
Your mom helped you with that, right?
And right, so if you're going to do one of these long distance trips, definitely find yourself a sympathetic spouse or mother who is willing to send you all of this stuff. And make sure that she's a good baker too, because receiving chocolate chip cookies in the mail after a long, hard trip is really wonderful. All right, so I told you a little bit about the socks, but I generally prefer merino wool socks as opposed to polyester. They deal with the funk a lot better than polyester does. Just a lightweight pair of socks. That's enough for me, but some people might need a little bit more, something a little bit thicker to give themselves a little bit more cushioning. And then I recommend using a really small gaiter like this one here. And now some people look at gaiters and they say, well, you're adding weight to your footwear system. And this is a good example of where I'm being more efficient by using a pair of gaiters, because I'm having to stop far less often to get stuff out of my shoes, and also keeps my feet cleaner. So that's better for the long-term health and long-term success. All right, we're going to skip through here. All right, any other questions about footwear? Yes?
So what if you're walking in snow, right? Is that why you want to waterproof?
Right. So if you're walking in snow, it depends on the consistency of the snow. If it's really wet snow, like in the springtime, if you're wearing a pair of waterproof shoes, your shoes are still going to get wet. So I would just go with non-waterproof shoes. Your feet get wet, they get cold for a while. It's tough, but you know, you got to kind of deal with it.
So it's more a question of comfort or rather than like comfort?
One more explainer about socks.
I'm sorry?
Socks.
Oh. I guess, so let me explain it this way. So if you have a pair of waterproof shoes, I would argue that in prolonged wet conditions, your feet are going to get wet. It's inevitable. So you will have to ford a creek, you will be walking on snow all day long or frequently enough, and that waterproof breathable material is not indefinitely waterproof. Water can and does move into the fabric, and you also have this big hole for where your ankle is. So your feet are still going to get wet, and then at that point, I just assume have the waterproof shoes, or the non-waterproof shoes, which will dry a lot faster. They're more, they're lighter weight. They're not as hot when, because they don't trap all that heat and moisture inside my shoe. So yeah, I think the bottom line is instead of trying to keep your feet dry, it's better off trying to figure out how to minimize the effects of wet feet.
So what conditions do you ask for ankle covering shoes?
So regarding the ankle support, that's always the thing with boots. And the way I look at boots, if you have say a really stiff boot, let's say you have if you're wearing a ski boot, your body still has to react to any abnormality on the surface. So if you step on a rock and you're in a ski boot, your whole knee is going to go like this because some part of your body has to absorb it. So naturally, or like biomechanically, our ankles are designed to absorb that stuff and to keep us balanced. If your ankles aren't strong enough yet to support you and walking on that trail with your backpack, then you might want to go for something that does have some ankle protection. But the ideal thing is definitely to let your ankles do that work.
How do you know when your ankles are strong enough?
How do you know when your ankles are strong enough? That's a personal decision. If you go up there, I don't know, give it a shot. Bring a pair of trail running shoes, and if you're carrying a lightweight pack and you feel totally comfortable, then you're apparently strong enough. Maybe you go on a day hike with just a pair of trail running shoes and see what it's like. And then maybe go on a 1-week trip or 2-week trip with a pair of trail running shoes after you've proven them.
Any suggestion for sole material? I find vinyl really slippery when wet.
So recommendations for sole material, you can't really choose it's not like tires where it's like, okay, well, I'd like a Toyota, but I want Goodyear tires. So you kind of take what you get. I think there are a lot of good rubbers out there nowadays, and there are definitely some rubbers that don't have the trade-offs that they used to. It used to be that if you wanted a sticky rubber, it wasn't durable. But if you wanted a hard rubber, then it wasn't sticky. So there's some rubbers that do a better job. I've been wearing La Sportiva shoes for a while now, and they do a pretty good job in that combination. But that's something you kind of have to just find out the hard way. Yeah. And then once you do find a pair of shoes that you really like, buy like 10 pairs of them, because you know that they're going to change the model like next year. And you'll be on the search again. Yes?
Would you still use like trail runner shoes for an extended trip, like a month of hiking with like maybe a 30-pound pack?
With how heavy of a pack?
Maybe 30 pounds?
Sure. So yes, I would still wear trail running shoes with a 30-pound pack on an extended trip. I'm not sure if you were around for that. That first slide was a photo from my Alaska trip. So it was a 24-day stretch, 657 miles without seeing any other human being, without crossing a road, and I had on a pair of trail running shoes that weren't much more robust than this. And when I left, when I started that section, I was carrying 2 weeks of food. My whole pack weighed about 45 pounds. So it's doable, but hopefully one of the things I come across in this presentation that this isn't my way or the highway. You need to make your own decisions and based on your own experience and your own strengths, weaknesses, comforts. So if you want to go or try a pair of trail runners for a month on that sort of trip, go for it. But if you're like really stuck on boots because you know they work for you, I'd say just go with it. Yeah.
So how do the poles relate to the shoe?
We'll get there. Yeah, let me. I'll keep. It's a few more slides, but let me keep on moving on some of this stuff. So after we've done clothing, we've done footwear. So we'll go to sleep systems. unfortunately, so the sleeping bag that I would take with me on this trip, so we're here in August. It's in the High Sierra. I would take with me a down insulated sleeping quilt, which is it's a lot different than your traditional mummy bag. So it's got this open back. And the reason I like these sleeping quilts as opposed to a mummy is because it's a lot more versatile. It's also a little bit lighter because you don't have any of this material in the back here. But the nice thing about a mummy is that say if it's a really warm night, I can just sort of loosely drape the quilt on top of me. But if it's a really cold night, then I can button this up, and there's a draw cord I could cinch tight, and that would also keep me comfortable. And as far as the temperature selection of this quilt, they say it's technically rated to 20 degrees, but that's not quite true. I would say if I were to sleep, let's go back to my clothing system here. So if I were to sleep, say in my underwear and my shirt, I'm comfortable in this sleeping bag down to about, say, 35 degrees. But then if I also wear my pants and I wear my insulated parka, now I'm good down to about 20, 25 degrees. So I look at my sleep system as part of the system that keeps me warm at night, but it's not the only thing I rely on. So I'm trying to eliminate some redundancies between these different between these different gear systems. And then for a sleeping pad, I'm not sure where it went. Usually I recommend a closed cell foam pad. The limitation of a closed cell foam pad is that they're not that comfortable if you sleep on a really hard surface because they're only, say, 5/8 of an inch thick. So you need to find a good soft campsite. And if you don't want to do that, or if you just insist on carrying a little bit of luxury, then you can take an air pad like this one. This weighs 9 ounces. It's about 1 inch thick, and you probably would still want to sleep on something soft, even with this pad. And then you'll notice it's also only torso length. So at night, what I do is I take my backpack and I put that down at my feet. The padding of the backpack will keep my lower half warm. And I'm also, because I'm sleeping on a soft surface, say pine needles, leaves, moss, that's not a surface that's really thermally conductive. So it's not like hard-packed wet ground that seems to really just sort of suck the warmth out of you. Any questions on sleep systems? All right, let's jump to shelters. I'm going to need a few volunteers here. Can I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Or maybe if you have your computer, can I get you here? So there are a couple of different shelters that I might use for this sort of trip. Actually, I'm going to bring you over here. All right, hold this one here. All right, if we can all raise it up. All right. OK, so this is an A-frame tarp. It only weighs about 9 ounces. And it's the great thing about this shelter, in addition to it being really light, you have a tremendous amount of coverage area for one person. And you also have great ventilation, so you won't have many condensation problems with this shelter. Unfortunately, there's no protection against the ground. There's no protection against bugs. And it has 2 open ends, even if you pitch it down to the ground. So this is a camp. If you do want to use a shelter like this, you need to know where to camp. So I usually try to pitch it right up against a big bush. I try to camp away from the bugs, away from, and kind of in a more protected area where there's not going to be a whole lot of wind. And then, OK, that's probably fine. I think that'll be good. But hang up here one more. I have one more shelter to show, so you can let go of this one. So normally what I'll do when I use an A-frame tarp is I'll take a water-resistant bivy sack like this one here. So this bivy sack has a waterproof floor and then a very breathable nylon top. And this gives me protection against the ground. It provides bug protection and also provides a little bit of extra warmth, like 5 degrees. A bivy sack like this is really helpful with that quilt because the quilt can be a little bit drafty. So this is, and the combination of these 2 systems is why I describe it as a modular tarp system, because it's designed to work together. All right, one more shelter to show. So this is another shelter that I might use. And it's definitely a more robust shelter. I need a center pole. Can someone jump underneath? All right, hold this one here. All right, so Okay, so this is a 13-ounce shelter. This is actually the shelter that I used with me up in Alaska. So I started, when I started this trip in March, okay, thanks guys. I was 30 miles north of the Arctic Circle, and I had a 13-ounce tarp with me. And then I used the shelter for the remainder of the trip, and the only time I needed to change it up a little bit was when the bugs came out. And then at that time, I added a bug nest like this one here that fits right underneath the shelter. So that shelter is provided a complete cover or complete protection, really robust, 360 degrees, and the whole system only weighed about 22 ounces. I think I'm going to skip it, yeah. Any questions about shelters? Yes?
So, does more insulation at night help if you're exhausted?
More insulation at night would definitely help if you're exhausted and can't produce your own body heat. I'd say that the best way to keep yourself insulated, though, is a heavier weight sleeping bag as opposed to a shelter. So a lot of people look at a tarp, and they're like, wow, well, it looks so chilly, which, true, it is, but in order to, so the better way to look at it is, okay, like let's say I need an extra 10 degrees of warmth. You can get an extra 10 degrees of warmth in a sleeping bag by adding, say, 3 or 4 ounces of insulation. Whereas to get 10 degrees of warmth in a shelter, you would need to add probably 3-4 pounds of material. So it's much better to go with a lighter weight shelter that is more functional to protect you against the wind and rain and bugs, and then use your sleeping bag and your clothing system to keep you warm at night.
So why would someone want to buy like one of those person more
why would someone want to take a traditional tent with them? I think that's a wonderful question to ask. Yeah, I don't know. I think most people walk in and they see it's all set up, and it's so easy. You just slide a pole in that sleeve and slide a pole in that sleeve, and pop, there it goes. So you don't need to think about where to set it up or how to tie out some of the guy lines. You don't need to think about any of that stuff. But there's a cost to that. It's a piece of foolproof gear, but unfortunately it weighs 3-4 times as much as a system like this does.
Is it more difficult because it's tough?
No, not really. It just doesn't have 2 poles. You have to use your trekking poles, and with the tarp, you have to use you have these guy lines, but there's a really simple way to do the guy line system. In fact, can I just have an arm? Okay, just hold that. So with the guy line system, let it slide a little bit. I just have a bowline knot here, and then I kind of use this trucker's hitch system. Now I've got a 2-to-1 pulley, and then to tie this thing off, I just use a slippery half hitch, and that's that system. I did it instantly. So it's really fast and easy, but it's a little bit of a skill, and a lot of backpackers, for some reason, don't want to learn the skills that allow them to take pieces of gear like this. All right, let's keep moving through here. Maps and navigation. I highly recommend learning how to use a map and a compass. With a map and a compass, I can do everything that a GPS can do. So I can pinpoint my exact location, at least to a relevant degree of accuracy, maybe not within 3 meters. But in a backpacking application, that sort of accuracy doesn't matter. And also by tracking my progress, I can figure out how fast I'm going and where I'm going. But maybe the more important thing with map and compass is that there's some big advantages. So it's more reliable because it's not electronic, it doesn't rely on batteries. It's also a lighter weight system. And then with a map, the maps that I print out are on, this is an 8.5 by 11, but the maps that I print out are normally 11 by 14 inches. And that amount of map provides me way more information than a GPS with a high-resolution screen that's this big. I mean, what do you want to be looking at if you're traveling across a landscape? You want to be looking at a hard piece of paper. And then finally, with the big thing with the map and compass is that a GPS can only tell you, if you're at point A and you want to get to point B, it'll tell you the distance and then tell you the direction, but it won't tell you how to get there. So it might have you swim across the deepest part of the river, and it might, you might have to go in and out of a canyon, and it might take you through the thickest brush. Whereas if you understand when you look at a map what all of that means, and then you can pick a path of least resistance. So we asked a question earlier about trekking poles. I always take trekking poles with me, especially on backpacking trips. They help propel me forward, they help propel me upward. And then on the descents, they help to sort of just take it easy on my knees a little bit, because you're always doing like those one-legged squats down, especially on steeper terrain. So the trekking poles are really helpful. I also use them to set up my shelter at night. I've used them to even to fend off grizzly bears. No joke. So I don't have, I should get the video. Well, you guys can come to another slideshow sometime about on my Alaska trip. I was up in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and I'm hiking along, and it's like, like midnight, but there's still plenty of daylight. So I'm hiking along up this valley, and I just have this moment where I'm like, you should really just like turn around and see if you can see a bear grazing on the hillside. So I look up, and I look this way, and I see a grizzly bear charging at me out of the brush. So I squared up to it, yelled at it, and it paused, and then like realized that I probably shouldn't be messed with, and then it ran away. Half an hour later, I have that same sense. So and I turn this way, and there's a grizzly bear charging at me across these gravel braids where there's a creek. And I was a little bit above it. I was probably like 10 feet above it on the bank. And the grizzly bear was so close by the time I saw it, it was like at that pole. So I took my trekking pole, and I was walking like this, and I threw my trekking pole across my body because I didn't have time to like square up and throw it. And it landed right in front of the bear, and I was also yelling at the bear. In between me throwing projectiles at it and yelling at it, it made a 90-degree turn. And as it was running away, it crapped itself. And there was this 30-foot-long streak of red berry crap, like along the gravel braids. But there's a great video in which I'm retelling the story, and like halfway through the video, it just dawns on me that I've scared the crap out of a grizzly bear, and it's like, you look at it and you're like, wow, that guy has been out there for a while. All right, food nutrition. So as far as food, 1 ounce of carbohydrates or protein has 100 calories. 1 ounce of fat has 240 calories. So if you wanted to go with two extreme types of diets, every day you need about 3,000 calories if you're going to be backpacking. So if you only want to take protein or carbohydrates, you could carry like 30 ounces of gummy bears. Alternatively, you could carry 12 and a half ounces of butter. So the better thing to do is find some balance of fat versus protein and carbohydrate. Usually for most people, it's in the range of 125 to 150 calories an ounce. If you're going to be on a really long distance trip, you probably will need a little bit more. If you are just out there for the weekend and you're like a petite male or female, or say a teenager, you probably will need a little bit less. But that 3,000 calorie per day is pretty good starting point for most people. All right, so as far as food types, I've never, ever taken enough chocolate on a backpacking trip. During the day, I'd say 2/3 of the things that I eat have some sort of chocolate in them. So it's chocolate-covered raisins, it's chocolate bars, it's an energy bar with chocolate in it, and not like the fake soy chocolate, but like chocolate. And I've just found, I kind of have the incinerator theory, where basically if I put nutrients into my body will burn them. So I just feed my body what it wants, and typically it always wants chocolate. So, and then for dinners, I make a hot meal at night, and I just the typical routine is that I boil water, throw in something that cooks really fast, like potatoes, beans, rice, couscous, ramen, and then I add butter, oils, cheese, and spices. And it basically every night looks like glop in a bowl, but at the end of a really long day, it still tastes really good. So, and I would also point out, it's probably possible if you're going up to the Sierra just for a short trip, you might want to just run over to the cafeteria and pick up yourself a couple of dinners, and then you can just pack them because it won't be that much weight, and it probably would look a lot better than glop in a bowl. So.
Do you ever bring meat?
I do bring meat with me, but it's always not like uncooked meat. So it's jerky, salami, that sort of thing. Yeah, and I usually eat it during the day. Sometimes I'll add, actually this is one of the best meals I ever made, this one here. It was cheese-filled linguine with some sort of fancy sausage, and then some pesto sauce and olive oil, and wait, that doesn't sound awesome? Come on. Trust me, it was. You guys kind of are spoiled by Google. All right. It's okay if I start a fire in here, right? I'm going to clear some room. All right, so the first time, the stove that I recommend, I actually made out of a Fancy Feast cat food can. This is it. This was the stove I used on my Alaska trip. It weighs 3/10 of an ounce. It will never break. It will never clog up. It only cost me $1.50, including the hole punch that I had to buy in order to make it. It burns denatured alcohol, which you can get in the paint department at the hardware store. And then I made a windscreen from Reynolds Wrap. And it just folds up nicely in the bottom of my pot. And the alcohol you can just keep in a water bottle like this one here. And I generally need about 3/4 of an ounce. 3/4 of an ounce of alcohol per meal for about 1.5 cups, 2 cups of water. I like to start the stove with matches because a lighter, you kind of have to get your finger down in there, and it's a good way to burn your hand night after night. So it takes about 7 to 8 minutes for the stove to boil water. But basically, if I don't have any water in here, but I would, if I had water, I would just put the pot right on top, and then I would cover the whole thing with the windscreen. Let it sit there for 8 minutes or so. It would come to a boil. Then I'd add my meal. Now the only problem with this stove is you can't put it out, so that's why I didn't put very much alcohol in it. And you can also see that the flame is not very bright. So if you're going to use this in the daytime, just be careful. When you start it, you'll hear it pop when it lights up. And then if you just kind of put your hand over it, you'll feel the heat. But just make sure that you don't. Like I have had a friend who started her stove, lit it up, and then was like, "Oh, it hasn't started yet," and then took her fuel bottle and went like this. So, and it's not a very explosive fuel, but you don't want to. It'd be easy enough to start a fire with it. So the first time I ever gave one of these lightweight clinics, I was in Boulder at the Eastern Mountain Sports Store, and I started this stove, and it's kind of a neat thing. It's like homemade. It costs you $1.50. So I put the pot on top, and I didn't have any water in it, and the pot got pretty hot just sitting there. And like after like 30 seconds of just saying how cool the stove was, I took the pot and I put it down on the carpet like that, and I hear, and it's like this black smoke coming from the edges of the pot. So I give the pot a tug and it won't move. So I really tug it hard and I pull it up, and there's like a bunch of carpet on the bottom of the pot and like this black burn mark on the carpet. And I look up the store manager. I'm like, sorry. And he's like, oh, no big deal, no big deal. So after the presentation, I'm like, well, I'm really sorry about your carpet. I'd be happy to replace it for you, whatever you need. And he's like, dude, it's really no big deal. And he just grabs a rolling rack and puts it right over the burn mark. So. All right. All right, water purification.
One recommendation about the fuel.
Yes?
Use alcohol stove just like that. Red adhesive tape around it so you know it's not water.
Oh, right. So the gentleman suggested if you're going to if you're going to bring alcohol out with you, somehow mark the water bottle, and that way you don't try to drink it. I generally don't have that problem because I use these soft-sided platypus bottles like this one. So these platypus bottles they're great. They weigh 1/6 the weight of an Nalgene bottle for the same amount of volume. They're collapsible, so they don't take up any room in my pack if I'm not using them. And then at night, they're soft, so I blow them up with air or with water, and I throw them in a stuff sack, and I can use them as a pillow. Pretty slick. And then for water treatment, I use these Aquamira drops. And this is enough for like 30 gallons of water. So I usually put these in separate, smaller dropper bottles, so I don't have to carry the whole thing out with me. But you take you take the mixing cap right here, 5 drops of A, 5 drops of B. I'm sorry, 7 drops of A, 7 drops of B. Let it react for 5 minutes. Put it in 1 liter of water, and within 15 minutes you have purified water. And I was just told this week that Aquamira is now approved as a water purifier here in the state of California, so you'll be able to find it at REI among other retail stores as in the water purification section. Yes?
How about UV light torch?
Right, so another good option, especially if you're with a group, is to use these UV lights. And it doesn't rely on chemicals, and it's also really fast. It's like 45 seconds. So that's a great option if you're with a group where you're doing a lot of purifying and you just want to do it fast. The problem with the lights is that you can't get them into these platypus bottles. You need a wider mouth. And it's also subject to failure. So you don't, you still have to carry something as a backup, because you might, if the batteries run out or if it malfunctions for some reason, you'll need something else.
Because everybody I knew on the AT gave up on them.
Yeah, like I said, there's some, you definitely need a backup because they are prone to failure. Okay, small essentials. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I kind of have my foot care kit and my first aid items up here if you want to take a look. Inevitably, you need a bunch of these kind of tiny items. Try to keep them to a minimum. And then as far as first aid, there are four principles that I use. The first is that every first aid item I take with me can't be improvised in the field. So I take with me, especially on group trips, I take with me some latex gloves, because I can't improvise these in the field. I also take things that are multifunctional. So instead of taking like those square pieces of gauze, I take roll gauze, because I can make square pieces of gauze out of roll gauze, but I can't do the opposite. So the square gauze is a little bit more versatile. Also, every first aid item is relevant to the trip and to the environment. So I'm not going to carry altitude drugs for a hike in the Appalachian Mountains. I'm not going to carry a snake bite kit for the Arctic. It's just not going to happen. And then finally, I have to know how to use it. So you'll see a lot of the campers by default. You'll look at their first aid kit, and they will have things in there that they have no idea how to use. Like they'll have like not a respirator, like a CPR mask. And you'll say, well, do you know how to give CPR? And they're like, no, but maybe someone else around will know how to give CPR. So just don't, if you don't know how to use it, just don't take it. It's the same reason I don't take a suture kit. I don't know how to give sutures, so I'm not going to take needle and thread for that. Now, there are two types of first aid scenarios. One scenario is that I can treat it in the field. So that's like small cuts, burns, scrapes, maybe some minor infections. I can do all that in the field, and I have the equipment to take care of that. But for those bigger medical emergencies, like say someone, and this is always far-fetched. I even hate using the scenario, but like someone breaks their femur while backpacking. Like it'd be really hard to do. You have to do something really dumb. But let's suppose that someone does. There's nothing that I can carry with me out there that is going to help someone with a broken femur. So my job at that point is to stabilize them, to get them as comfortable as possible, and then to get help. I need to get them out. So in that case, I usually take with me some sort of satellite communications device. What I've been using recently is one of these spot communicators, or spot connects. And it hooks together with my phone via Bluetooth. And I can call for help. I can call for help. I can also call 911, which goes to all the search and rescue teams. I can also send OK messages just to let the folks back home, hey, I'm camped here tonight. Everything is good. I'll be, don't worry about me. And then with this Spot Connect, I can actually send out messages. So this was a 4-day trip that I did up in Alaska last summer. And the last message when I arrived at the trailhead, I said, out, safe and happy, excited about dinner. And that, my mom, she gets the message, and like within 5 minutes, I have a phone call from her and saying, hey, really glad that you're out. Have a great dinner. Talk to you later. So this is I can't remember their Spot slogan, but it's something about, it's rescue when you need it, and for all the other times, basically a peace of mind. So it's a pretty inexpensive investment, pretty lightweight, and it works pretty well. Yes? Hold on one second. But 2 questions. Yes?
Do you have to worry about batteries running out? Do you have anything to recharge them? Or
the batteries last a really long time. And with the newer units, there's also an indicator about battery life. The first generation, this was a second generation unit, but the first generation unit I think I used it for 2 or 3 years and never had to replace the batteries. So I wouldn't be too worried.
You're using your cell phone with it?
So that's so I was doing, like last summer, I was guiding a bunch of 1-week trips, and my cell phone had no problem for a week. And in that case, just bring an extra battery too. That's not necessarily a bad idea. It weighs half an ounce, maybe an ounce. Easy thing to do. Yes?
Does it work only inside the US?
The Spot works worldwide, but it's mostly only on land masses. So if you're going to be like sailing across the Pacific, this isn't the system for you. But it will work pretty much anywhere on the world's land masses. Okay, maybe I think, fine. All right, last subject is backpacks. There are a couple of considerations with backpacks. The first one is that, backpacks, let me rephrase that. Backpacks have to serve two functions. They have to carry all of my stuff, they have to fit it all, and they also have to support it all. So I pick a backpack at the very last minute. It's like, okay, here's all the stuff that I need to bring with me. Here's how much it weighs. Therefore, this is the backpack that I need. You don't want to work the other direction because you'll end up getting a backpack that's either too big or that won't support the load or that's just too excessive for what you're using it for. So there are generally two types of backpacks that we use nowadays. Ignore this. This is a little bit of a funky backpack, but it works. So this backpack here is called it's a suspension backpack or a framed backpack, and it's given a rigid suspension system with these aluminum stays in here, and there are two of them. But you also might have a backpack that has a frame sheet, which would be like a plastic sheet inside of here, and there are also ones that have these peripheral rods, so it would be this metal rod around the perimeter of the backpack. And the whole point of that suspension system is to transfer weight from your shoulders to your hips. So if I put this backpack on and I take all the weight off of my shoulders, this backpack still sits right on my hips. And if I'm carrying a heavy load, I want it on my hips because my hips are supported by my glutes and by my abdomen muscles. In comparison, my shoulders are really puny. So I don't want to be having to support a lot of weight with my shoulders. The other type of backpack is a frameless backpack like this one here. It doesn't have anything rigid in it at all. And if I try to do that same exact thing, the backpack will just fall over. Now not all of the weight gets supported by my shoulders, but I'd say probably, say 3/4 of it will get supported by my shoulders. But my shoulders are strong enough to support 25, 30 pounds. But as soon as I kind of go over that threshold, I want something with a little bit more, with a more rigid system. And then to waterproof my backpack, I just take a plastic trash compactor bag. So you can buy a whole bundle of these. I think this was years ago. I bought like a 50 roll for like $15 at Walmart. They last about a month. They're very waterproof, and I just put it on the. I'll take my sleeping pad. And by putting the sleeping pad in here and then putting this inside the backpack, it gives what is otherwise a rigid or an unrigid backpack some structure and some shape. And it also protects my back against anything that might be hard on the inside of the pack. So. National Geographic did a beautiful 16-page spread on my Alaska Yukon expedition. There were signed copies available. Are there any more left? No. Okay, that's fine. You can all, if you like, you can grab. I still have some for sale on my website. And then finally, here, let me give you that other paperwork. I mentioned a few times, but I do guided trips. So this year I'll be offering 3 7-day trips up in the High Sierra in Yosemite Valley, and I'll also be doing 1 3-day trip that's much more of a beginner intermediate trip out at Henrico State Park. It's the middle of May, I believe it's the 14th through the 16th. So it's a Friday through a Sunday. And the whole objective is to basically learn about and apply the gear, supplies, and skills that we've discussed today, plus a lot more. So if you're interested in one of those trips, on one of the chairs back there, there was some pamphlets, but I'll leave some up here as well, just sort of some information, and that's all also up on my website. All right, thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.